It begins with a lady waking up, with a lifeless body lying next to her. Shortly after, she dismembers the body to burn it in a field. The burnt remnants get dumped somewhere in a barn. While we watch that take place, a man narrates. But we don't see this man. Who and where is he? The lady is Emily, who soon enters a house. As she relaxes there, a man comes to her. He is James, telling her she's been gone for 3 days, without so much as a text message. James starts calling the police, because they told him to call once Emily returned. The lady, however, disapproves of this call to the point of ending the man's life. Supposedly, he wasn't that important to her. In the washroom, Emily inspects a wound on her body. The mysterious voice keeps narrating. Then a man arrives at the front door, stating he is Detective Ransom. He asks her if James is home, but she lies and says he isn't. So he comes inside. While he's there, he asks Emily where she was. The lady does not answer him. Instead, she sits nearby to put her hand on his leg. It seems to have some controlling effect on him. She gets on top of the detective, which now makes him start contorting. The next scene shows us something unusual. It looks like Emily has taken his form. Ransom's body lies decomposed on the couch. Yet now there is a fresh one inhabited by Emily, except it is no longer Emily. The scene we observed at the start had the same bizarre body-swapping phenomenon take place. Whoever took the detective's body took Emily's in the same way. We also come to realize that the one entering bodies is possibly the person narrating. He now stands there, practicing saying who he is, Freddie Ransom. After doing that, he sets the place on fire and leaves. As he drives, the voiceover tells us that painkillers, along with antibiotics, slow the change. This change has something to do with him getting out of bodies. Somehow he knows which person to come to, so he can take. This parasite entity acquires the memories of the hosts he sits inside. That makes maneuvering himself in this world much more efficient. He says he needs for his condition. Following that, Freddie enters a bar. There he sees a lady, whom he comes near to order 2 drinks. She asks him how he knew what she likes to drink. He responds by saying he's psychic. He even proves it to her by guessing what she's thinking. Then he tells her he's a cop, not a creep. The lady tells him she is Julia. At that moment, the voice tells us that she's the only one that matters. Soon enough, they engage in intimacy. But he gets struck with bad luck during that pleasant time. A strong pain comes over him, making him tell Julia to run away. He walks along the street, feeling strong discomfort, until he comes to a vehicle containing 2 people. Freddie's badge and gun allow him to sit inside the vehicle. He tells the lady to go home. The man, though, is not that lucky. Freddie tells him that if he doesn't do this, he will lose his life. So he takes him, like he took Freddie as Emily. The next scene shows us his new host. He arrives at the house the man lived at before losing his life. Upon entering, a lady is upset to see him, so she leaves his side. Soon he enters the room where she sleeps to join her in bed. In the morning, he goes to work in a hospital. Seeing a lady there seems to give him the man's memory of being with her. In the memory, she calls him Sam. The man is a doctor. After he deals with his patient, the voiceover tells us he can keep with the routine of his hosts for a certain time. Sometimes he needs a break. As he sits in a restaurant, he sees Julia walking outside. This prompts him to get into a nearby taxi, where he tells the driver to follow the car Julia is getting into. But the driver doesn't want to do it. She considers it an absurd request. At that point, the narrator tells us he's been trying to figure out Julia's new address for over 1 year. Later, at a bar, the voiceover says he only has one thing left from his true family. He doesn't say what it is, though. Then Julia comes to sit near him. We see that he knows her routine. She tells Sam she saw him with a younger girl. He replies that he won't be making that mistake again. He has a family. This causes Julia to say she had a small boy and a husband once. Her son lost his life a few years ago, at the age of 3. She also speaks well of her husband, saying how romantic he was. However, one night she woke up to find him gone. She thinks it was all too much for him. To this information, Sam wants to buy her a drink. When she asks if he's a good person, he says it might not matter, because bad things happen to good people. She responds that it's important that the bad thing is not yourself. This statement seems to weigh him down. At night, Sam wakes up somewhere and calls the girl from the hospital, Rachel. He tells her that his wife kicked him out, so he wants her to come over. In a few moments, she comes over, thinking it's weird for her to be there. She sees him lying in bed from a distance, while we see how deteriorated he now is. Afterward, we don't see how it happened, yet Sam is now Rachel. Or rather, the being that Sam's body hosted is now being hosted by Rachel's body. She burns the previous body's remains in the same place as at the start of the film. What is this place the parasitic being keeps coming back to? It must hold some significance for him. While Rachel is finishing up, a lady appears there to make her nervous. Even though the lady sees her leaving, Rachel doesn't say anything to her before driving away. Where she goes next is the hospital she works at. The reason is to pick up some antibiotics. Then Rachel arrives at her place of living, where she gets dressed to look sensual. Again, she goes back to the bar. We can guess why. She sits next to the apple of her eye, Julia. They smoothly start conversing right away. Julia reveals that she's writing a book. Her therapist suggested that she write down her thoughts. When she introduces herself, Rachel says her name is Drew. Could this be the male parasite's name? Why did he give her a male's name when in the body of a lady? Yet Julia makes no mention of it. After a few more words, she says Rachel has sad eyes. It causes Julia to give her her card that contains the address to her office. She is a counselor. After that, a man arrives, asking if he can buy Rachel a drink. This is Julia's cue to leave. The man sits with her and talks about football. As he does, she watches Julia. The narrator, Drew, perhaps, insults the man for speaking about something he doesn't care about. At that moment, Rachel observes the television, stating that a grisly discovery took place at a farm. The sketch of the person, along with the description, matches Rachel. Due to this, she decides to use the annoying man next to her, so they leave the bar. We see them being intimate at her place. Drew narrates that he's been a female enough times to engage in such acts. If he acquires the characteristics of a female brain when inside a female body, then he could even enjoy it sometimes. Once the man starts coming onto her too strongly, Rachel tries to back him off. Since he doesn't listen, she throws him off and they start fighting. It doesn't take long for her to end his life. Her plan to enter his body is now ruined. Following that, Rachel leaves while the police are outside because a lady called for them after seeing the lifeless man from the bar. She is forced to run from them. Shortly after, she hides in a garage, deciding to sleep there. Upon waking up, she notices her hand has started to change for the worse. To add to the negativity, her boyfriend finds her. Rachel responds by striking him with a bat before running away. He chases her, but she manages to hide in the back of a truck. While lying there, she looks at the card Julia gave her. Drew wonders if he should just tell her the truth. Afterward, Rachel goes someplace to see Julia meeting with a man. Later, she watches them in a restaurant. Her condition is getting worse, and ugly liquid is now coming out of her arm. When Julia and the man part ways, that is Rachel's cue to follow him. She knocks on the door to his flat. Once he opens it, we see she has started to deteriorate across her body. In the next scene, Drew is now the man. Goodbye to Rachel, another body has ended. He talks to Julia on the phone, saying that he can't stop thinking of her. We come to know the man's name is Robert. He wants to meet her, so she agrees. He is now at her place, watching her move in slow motion with loving attention. He makes a toast to possibility. Julia says there is something familiar about him. Then she asks what would two people such as themselves want at this moment. Robert tells her it is to connect, before kissing her. While they kiss, Julia finds a pad on him. He tells her that he walked into a nail. Soon they engage in more serious intimacy. It seems to spark the beginning of their relationship. We see them doing many activities together over an unknown course of time. To contrast with these joyful moments, Drew narrates that his mother once told him everything ends. Later, Julia watches the TV, which mentions the farm Drew uses to dump the burnt remains of all the people he ended. The news says that many victims were discovered there. Some were identified, Rachel is one of them. Then Robert comes to turn the television off. Julia tells him she has spoken to some of those people at the bar. He tries to take her mind off it, but she can't shake off the fear. He won't let anything bad happen to her, are his comforting words to the one he loves. As the days go by, we see him taking pills to cope with his condition. However, his time is running out in Robert's body. He starts feeling pain in the washroom. Once he comes out, Julia tries to touch him, yet he tells her not to. Now is the time for him to tell her the truth. There is no easy way to say it, so he wants her to sit for such heavy news. He starts by saying she's the only one he's ever said this to. When he was 12 years old, he was responsible for the demise of his mom. The year it happened was 1954. Julia, of course, acts with disbelief. When he took her, he felt pure love. It was a love he never felt again until a few years ago. That is when he reveals the crucial secret about himself, that he takes people. He tells her the truth about his condition. Julia questions what he takes, and he says that it's everything that makes a person. On top of taking it, he also keeps it. We are left wondering if he has retained all the mental contents of everyone he ever took. This strange information makes Julia want to go home, which prompts Robert to say he has loved her longer than she knows. He then says he told her his real name, Drew. Before he was Robert, he met her many times. He saw her and felt the love that Richard had for her. We realize he was inside the body of her husband. This solves the mystery of why her husband left her. Because it wasn't him, it was Drew. After that, he knew he needed to make her happy. With this unsettling information, Julia starts losing her calm. He says he felt terrible that he had to leave her. At this point, she wants to know where Richard is. Drew tells her that he's at the farm. Once she asks who he is, he says he doesn't know. The man has to live with no knowledge of who or what he is. He says that none of this was personal, it was about his survival. Julia wants to go, but he says again that he loves her. She responds aggressively by taking out a stun gun and attacking him with it. Afterward, she gets on him, making the man accidentally affect her with his bizarre power. The next scene has Drew taking the form of Julia's body. He cries as he sits near her corpse. This is the last thing he wanted to do, though now that it's done, there is no going back. The man's life is now ruined. As Drew sits in the bar, he narrates how he spent his whole life looking for answers. He also always knew that he was the only one who could stop this freakish feeding. We then see him contorting in bed in a decayed form. Finally, Drew has decided to end it. Eventually, we see a huge organic shape on the bed. An elderly man rips out from it in a short time. He is shocked to find himself still alive. This is the man in his true form, showing his true age. So he walks outside, narrating about the guilt people carry with them throughout their lives. While he sits on a bench, he keeps wondering who he is, and goes on living. perhaps only now. As an elderly man, he will never again steal another person's life.